welcome to Elements of Ayurveda, Empowering Wisdom of Life. I'm your host, Colette, and in this podcast, I hope to empower you to take charge of your own health by sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition from India. We will also discuss topics like health and wellness, nutrition, yoga, fitness, meditation, breath work, and much more, as well as interviewing lots of inspiring people along the way. My humble wish is to help you to connect to your true nature, to Mother Nature, and to each other. If you like the content, be sure to subscribe to the show, and the new episodes will automatically download for you to enjoy. If you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend you listen to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. I've also set up a Facebook group for us to connect and to support each other, and I'd love for you to join me over at Elements of Ayurveda podcast group. And now, here's the show. Real quick before we get started, I wanted to remind you of the Spring Digestive Reset Cleanse starting March 29th. This is the final call as we prepare to go in a group format online to do this individually tailored digestive reset cleanse. I have a 90-minute consult with each person. And not only are we going to cleanse out those fat-soluble toxins, those emotions, undigested emotions, any physical toxins in the body, we're going to eliminate those. But in this cleanse, you get a lot of education around your unique mind-body type in the 90-minute consult and also in the webinars that I provide on the private cleanse page on my website. So if you're ready to unpack any of those toxins that are really causing lethargy or digestive problems or foggy mind or just feeling out of balance, come join us on this nurturing cleanse. There's no fasting. You get really good foods. I, in fact, eat the foods when I'm not cleansing. They're that good. So check it out. The link is in the show notes, or you can go to my website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com/group cleanse. I hope you can join us. And now let's get on with the show. Hello and welcome to Elements of Ayurveda. Today I have the lovely Amy Wheeler with me. Hi, Amy.
Good morning or good afternoon.
Yes.
Nice to be here.
It's great. It's been a few weeks since we last spoke, and I'm excited for our conversation today, which is all about personal boundaries. And I know we all have experience with this, but what are personal boundaries? Well, they're protective safeguards created to protect ourselves physically, emotionally, and mentally. Now, these boundaries are ways in which you find it acceptable for people to behave around you and towards you. And they're safeguards that also allow us to feel safe in expressing ourselves freely and maintaining our integrity as well. It's really the foundation for establishing our individual identity and healthy relationships. So for me, personal boundaries are really about self-care, which we talk a lot about in Ayurveda and yoga. And it's an essential component of your health and well-being. What do you think, Amy? What's your definition of personal boundaries and their importance in our health and well-being?
For me, having boundaries means that I am present to myself. I'm in touch with the emotions and sensations and thoughts that are coming up inside of me, and that I can be informed by them. For example, this week I had a few days where anger was coming up, and that was the sign to me that, oh, you need to set a boundary here. So for me, it's, obviously self-care is going to lead to more self-connection, but for me, the definition of me having good boundaries is that I am completely connected to myself on all levels, and that I'm willing to speak my truth.
Right. And I think exactly that's where it starts. Self-connection, self-study, self-discovery, which is when you go on the Ayurvedic and yogic journey, that is all about discovering yourself, self-realization, and really understanding yourself first, understanding your mind-body type, understanding your tendencies, what makes you tick, what aggravates you, how you work in the world. And I think that's the most important thing to start with. And this is, it's something that would be great to be taught early in our years, right? But it's definitely something we should take on in adulthood and really taking responsibility for understanding ourselves.
It's interesting. I had a student this week say, I don't know if I'll be a good yoga therapist because I don't have very good boundaries. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, that's what you do when you become a yoga therapist. You take over 3 years to get to know yourself and to understand yourself so that you'll be a good yoga therapist. And she said, well, are we going to learn some content about that? And I said, yes, you're going to do it through personal practice. You're going to do it through work with your mentor. You're going to do it through setting boundaries in the group setting. We'll actually have lectures on it, but really it's an inside job. Like that's that kind of self-connection and having a safe place to practice it and to notice yourself going in or out of balance and then get in touch with whatever's happening inside and then get the courage to speak your truth and say, here's a boundary. I mean, that's what I would hope a lot of training programs are teaching us to do. I'm afraid some of them, make it very academic and it's not a safe place to learn boundaries. But for my trainings, that's a big part of what we're doing is let's get to know ourselves deeply.
Oh, absolutely. And it really is our responsibility because it's our responsibility for how others treat us. And it's really important for us never to betray our values and to express them clearly and stand by them. Because if we don't express ourselves clearly, then we're creating confusion. So I think we really are responsible for putting those limits and those boundaries out there, expressing them compassionately, clearly, and not wavering on them as well.
And, I was thinking about this morning after meditation, that when you know what your needs are and you're willing to express them clearly, there's this huge kind of scary, fearful thing that happens. You don't know what the outcome will be now that you've spoken your truth. Mm-hmm. And so I'm in one of these situations right now at my university job that they're giving me 180 kids in a lecture class.
Oh my goodness.
And to me, that's way beyond my personal boundaries for being a good teacher and self-care. It's ridiculous. So I got the courage to go talk to my department chair and to my dean and tell them that this is incorrect. This is not ethical for the students. It's not ethical for me. And now there's this, I did this yesterday, this terrifying feeling inside of me of, oh my God, I've spoken my truth. What's going to happen now? And it may happen Monday. It may happen a month from now. It may happen a year from now, or nothing may happen.
Right.
But part of being able to express your boundaries is to come inward and say, whatever happens as a result of me being honest and authentic is okay with me. Exactly. And in yoga, we call that Ishvara Pranidhana, that you let go of the outcome. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck with their boundaries. They're kind of attached to a certain outcome, and they're afraid if they speak their needs or speak their truth, that they won't get the outcome they want. And I would just say we need to completely back it up and say, take care of yourself, speak your boundaries, and let the chips fall. Stop trying to control everything, even though it's scary.
Absolutely. And I think some people are afraid not only of the outcome, but feeling guilty for saying no or feeling that, oh, maybe I'll be rejected. Right. But there's nothing more empowering for you than speaking your truth and being in alignment with your values. Because then, say, for example, in this situation, you're given 180 students, which is crazy in one lecture, and then that you didn't speak up. Well, what does the future hold? And then, they could turn to you next year and give you more students. And then, then if you speak up, they're like, well, you didn't say anything last year, so again, it comes back to really speaking up in the moment.
Absolutely. And I told some of my colleagues what I'd done, and they looked at me like I was from Mars. Oh, really? They're like, you did what? Because they've been putting up with it. And they just couldn't believe I had the strength and courage to walk into the dean and tell him my truth. Like, they were like, what? you did what?
Right. Well, good for you. How did it feel?
Like I said, I'm terrified because now I'm going to be the bad guy. I'm going to be the non-cooperative one. I'm going to be the one who doesn't want to work so hard, which is silly because we all work so hard. But I'm okay with that. If that's how the chips fall and I get quarantined, fine. It's still not right. It's not.
Exactly.
So
it's not right for you and it's not right for the students.
Yeah. And I'll take my chances.
Yeah. And how would you feel if you hadn't said anything?
Well, that was the problem. I was so resentful for 3 or 4 or 5 days. I was having hot flashes from hell. And I was journaling going, what is this about? It was like this rage inside of me. And I was snapping at people who had nothing to do with the situation. And I was like, wait a minute, you got to get a hold of this girl. Why are you so angry this week? Yeah. And then when I really got in touch with it, I was like, oh, it's because they're crossing my boundaries and I don't like it. And so, that's what I'm saying is when we're in touch with ourselves and we have emotions like anger, that is not a bad thing. Yeah. You don't want to shut that down. You want to be like, okay, anger, what is it that you need to tell me? What am I missing here? And how can I be in relationship with anger and figure out how, at first I wanted to write a nasty email and I stopped myself until I had a few days to digest and figure out exactly what I wanted to say. And can I say it without crying?
Yeah.
I was so emotional and I got a hold of myself. And by the end of the week, I was like, yep, I can say it kindly. I can say it truthfully. I can do it without crying, and I'm going to do it and let the outcome be what it's going to be.
Good for you. That's inspirational. And I do believe that that's it. Trust yourself. Trust your gut. Trust your intuition. Trust your feelings in your body. Like you were saying, those hot flashes. It was your body going, your pitta is being raised here. What's pitta? It's heat. It's frustration. It's anger. And then you took to journaling to trying to figure that out, where it stemmed from. But really, I think it is important to trust yourself. And if something doesn't feel right to you, express it. And, sometimes it doesn't make sense. And I don't think we even need to question it too much sometimes. Like if you're in a situation, for example, where there's no time to talk it out or journal about it and it doesn't feel right and you want to get out of that situation, trust your gut, trust those sweaty palms, trust that feeling like something is not right. And I don't think you should have to justify it either. Just be very clear about how you feel, because unless of that, I'm sorry, but,
And you can, when you're having these sensations or when I'm having these sensations, I give myself space and time. So someone might be pushing me to make a decision and I'll say repeatedly, I did it yesterday on another call, 3 or 4 times, I'm going to need some time to think about that. Then they come back and they'd be like, yeah, but what about this? And can we do it this way? And I'll say, you know what? I'd like to meditate on that. And then they come back and push again. You know what? I'd like to take a night to sleep on that, and I'll get back to you. I mean, it happened 3 or 4 times that they wanted the answer right then and there. Right. And I just kept pushing back, saying in a nice way, I'm sorry, that's not going to happen on this phone call.
Yeah.
You just presented me with some information that changes a lot of things in my life. And now I need the time to digest. So back off.
Yeah. And I think that's great and to take that time when it allows. Absolutely, because you need to digest it, like you said, and then just figure out, well, let's look at every aspect of the situation and what do you feel right about, what feels right with you, and how do you want to proceed. And when I was referring to making a decision in the moment, is like, I remember one time when I was younger, I was going out for a night. We went to some bowling alley and I immediately went in the door. I'm like, oh no, I can't stay here. But it was like, okay, you can stay if you want. I said to my friends, but I just need to go because something about this just doesn't feel right. So in those type of situations, just really trusting your gut. Yes. rather than staying somewhere or even if you're in company, and someone's being rude or intimidating you and going, oh, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to feel like the weirdo. I just want to be nice and let me just sit here. I just don't think you should. I think you should just, follow that truth within you and do what feels right. Just excuse yourself, and without having to go into long explanations, just be going, no, this is not feeling right to me. Like right now, I'm going to leave.
I love this conversation. You're making me think of all the times I'm setting boundaries. I don't have that many people over to my home because it's kind of my safe place where I, curl up and hibernate. But we had someone over for dinner and they were just really rude. They were like, these chairs are hard and I'm not sure I'm going to like this food. And because I was vegetarian and just like one thing after another. And just, it was a horrible experience. And then at 9:00, I was like, well, I'm going to bed, thinking that would be a hint that they should leave. And they were still there at 11:00, And so a few weeks later, they said, oh, we really want to come over and have dinner again. When can we? And I just said, well, I don't think I would like to have dinner again. And they just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And I just kept holding the boundary. And I didn't critique them. I didn't tell them I don't like them or anything. I just said, no, that's not going to happen. I'm not ready to do that. And with no explanation, just no, thank you. And it was hard. Oh my gosh, because they kept coming back and coming back and coming back. But I was not going to let those people in my house again. No way.
I hear you. And that's it. The less you go down this road of giving some winding explanation, that you just say, no, thank you. No, it's not, it's not going to happen. The less they have to pull on, and to argue about.
Right. If you have a boundary pusher and you give them a reason why they can't have what they want, they're gonna go around it and tell you 5 reasons why they can and why they should and why you should.
Right.
So I think it's best just to politely decline and say, I've thought about this quite a bit and this is where I'm at and I'm letting you know, no, thank you.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Just be firm and don't waver and don't say you're sorry.
And here's the other thing. Like, if like in this instance, as soon as they walked out my door at 11:00 at night, I was like, they will never step foot in my house again. Yeah. I was done. I was done boundary. 2 hours. Right. And so I don't ever have to question that again.
Right.
Like, I don't have to beat myself up or say, oh, why can't I be nicer? And why can't I be more tolerant? And no, I made my decision. It's done. We don't need to think about this anymore. If I see you in the grocery store, I'll smile and say hello and talk for 3 minutes and then we're done.
Yeah. And that comes with knowing yourself too. And knowing what you accept and what you don't accept, and knowing when people drain you, having that sensitivity in your body, and knowing after a conversation with someone like, oh my goodness, that person just drained me. I need to really watch my time with that person. I'm really being in tune with how you're feeling.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, paying close attention to that. And also for me, I tend to draw these people that just don't take no for an answer, and they keep coming back and keep coming back, and they wear me down. And I had a really terrible experience with this a few years ago that got me into so much trouble and such a huge detour. It was like a 2-year detour off my focus, off my being of service to the world, because it was, we got in deep. It was a very horrible situation, but it happened because for 9 months, this person pushed and pushed and pushed. And I said, no, 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 I love you, but no. And finally one day I was weak and I was like tired, and I was like, okay, fine, we'll do it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So what I learned from that is, if someone is that much of a boundary pusher that they don't respect me enough to take even 3 times of me saying no, I need to create space and distance and not be near that person. Right. As painful as it is, and as much as we love people, they're not listening to us. They're not respecting us. They're not taking us seriously. Because if they were, they would stop.
Yeah. And it's about their agenda more than your feelings.
Or the relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, who does that?
Yeah.
Like I don't want to say I'm ashamed, because I don't want to feel ashamed of myself, but I'm thinking back on it and how much energy and time and focus it took to get through that situation, I think I'm over it. I think that situation taught me, if people keep saying something 3 times and I've said no, now you're not going to hear from me. Like, now I'm comfortable not answering emails. Mm-hmm. Before I was like, oh, we have to get resolution. We have to come to closure. Now I'm like, okay, I told them 3 times. They didn't hear me. Goodbye. Yeah. You're blocked. No, I don't actually block them, but someone who cannot listen to my needs, I'm not going to be in it with you. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I have been very, very weak as well, especially in my 20s and 30s, in relationships, and always feeling bad about hurting other people when I'm speaking my truth, or when I'm asking for something a certain way, or just speaking my what boundaries I want to put in place. But then I would feel bad about, oh, I'll hurt them. Oh, I'm asking for too much. Like all that mess.
100%. I mean, I think that was the root of my boundary problems, was people pleasing, right? Caretaking, codependency. Let's just call it what it is. Yes, complete codependency. Yeah. Yep. And so what really helped me with that, and I always like to try to give people hints and strategies about how to, get tougher and get a spine and speak your truth, is that my mom was a trainer for something called nonviolent communication. And so basically it's called the NVC. You can go to www.nvc.org, I think. And it's all about helping people communicate their needs in a way that's not harmful to themselves or harmful to the other. And there's, 4 simple steps. It's like identifying your own feelings. And they have these huge sheets full of tons of feelings, because let's face it, a lot of us don't even know what those sensations are in our body. Absolutely. We don't know what we're feeling. Mm-hmm. So that's step 1, is identifying what I'm feeling. Step 2 is, what are the needs underneath that feeling? So for me, with this experience at work recently, I was feeling angry for several days, but I didn't know why. So then I go to my needs sheet. They have a whole, like 300 needs on a piece of paper. And my need is this.
So then interesting.
Yeah. And then the third step of NVC is basically, how can I express these needs? Like what is, I don't want to say what is my goal, but what is it that I need to move forward with? And then how can I communicate that in a way that, is not harmful to myself or others? And how can I make a request? Right. So that's how I learned setting boundaries. So that's exactly what I did with my situation at work. I'm feeling anger. My need is, I don't want to be taken advantage of. I want to express that I think this is unethical to put this many kids in a class, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to do it in a way that is not harmful to me or the other person. I didn't accuse anybody. I didn't tell anybody they were wrong. I just explained how it is in a classroom with 190 students, squished like sardines, red-faced. The desks are too small. There's, cheating on every single test and assignment because they're so crammed in there. Like, I just listed all the ways it isn't working for me or for the students. So nobody was harmed. It was just matter of fact, like, this is this situation.
Yeah, and I think that is important, and it's challenging as well, identifying the first 2 steps, identifying your feelings. That can be challenging. And then really challenging to know the needs underneath your feelings.
Well, and that took me 10 years. I'm not even kidding.
My mom check out those sheets.
My mom took me to my very first NVC retreat, probably 20 years ago. And then for 10 years, I worked on it. Like, what's my feeling? What's my need? Okay, what request do I want to make? And in fact, I worked all of that into my current optimal state system because it was so meaningful and important to me. That we all learn to identify our somatic sensations, identify our emotions, identify our thoughts, kind of know which guna category all of those things fall into, tying it into Ayurveda. and then be able to speak our truth, be able to use satyam, as yoga says. Right.
Yeah, because that's very, very challenging, I find, is peeling back the layers and go, okay, what's the need under here that could be tied to belief systems that go back to when you were younger? It can run really deep.
Absolutely. And, what you find when you work with yourself in this way is that the strategy that you originally thought you had to have happen to meet your need, you realize, there might be other ways to meet this need. It kind of opens you up and makes you a little more spacious, because now you're not attached to the strategy. I'm not attached to, you have to get me less students in my classroom. I'm just saying my need is to, not, and so now the dean or the chair or whoever wants to talk to me could come back and say, Amy, we've thought about it. How about if we got you a teaching assistant? How about if we did this? How about if we made a lab portion? How about, okay, well, I'd love to consider some of these other options. And wonderful. It just opens more space.
Exactly, because like you said, you're not responsible for how the other person reacts. You're just stating your needs.
Right. And that's what boundary setting is about.
Yes. Yeah,
right there.
Absolutely. Huge.
I'm not responsible
not being worried.
for you.
Pardon?
Yeah. I'm not responsible for anybody else.
Yes, exactly. And that's it. You're responsible for understanding yourself, your mind-body type, how you are in the world, the tendencies, understanding you're responsible for understanding your needs and expressing them clearly and compassionately. But other than that, you're not responsible for how others react to that.
So let me throw this at you. Mm-hmm. So in my life as a professional woman, and I don't know how many other women out there have had this happen, but I have had various forms of sexual harassment in every professional job I've ever had. And most of the time that I call it out, first of all, I'll just say in my 20s and 30s, I didn't call it out. I was scared to call it out. I didn't want to risk losing a job. I didn't want to alienate people. So I just kind of uncomfortably laughed or giggled and tried to get out of the situation. But since I've been in my 40s, I have basically no tolerance for it. And when I call it out and say, that's not comfortable for me, please don't touch me, or please don't tell me that you would like to do XYZ with me, right? or whatever silly, stupid thing that they're saying to me. Most of the reaction that I get from men is, oh, come on, you're being too sensitive. Oh, come on, we're friends. Oh, come on, can't you even take a joke? What's wrong with you? They turn it back on me as if there's something wrong with me, as if I'm like frigid and, I'm not a frigid person. I got a really hot husband. But I personally don't want my male colleagues saying super inappropriate sexual things to me.
Right.
There's a difference. So, I just want to throw that out there. What do you do in those situations? I think it's like gaslighting. It's telling you you're crazy for having these needs. So what do you do when you're gaslit?
Absolutely. And I think you really have to stand up to it the first time, because if you don't the first time and there is some touching going on, the next time it might advance even more, right? And then they're like, oh, what's going on? You didn't have a problem with it the last time. So I think it's really important to speak up on it straight away, and understanding that their attacks on you is just their embarrassment. So they'll attack you, they'll say all sorts of things, they make you feel like you're crazy, gaslighting, like you said, but also just to recognize that as they're embarrassed, and to, it's a sad situation that someone has to intimidate somebody like that, and that they can't express themselves or their feelings in a manner that's going to be comfortable for every party, but they have to intimidate. And that's one of my pet peeves, is intimidating, particularly men intimidating women.
Right. And then you still have to work with them.
Right.
And now they have this little vendetta and they are embarrassed. So, it probably isn't going to end well for me. But the point is, we go back to Ishvara Pranidhana, that we let the outcome be what it's going to be, because it's the right action.
Right.
to tell someone, I don't want you to touch me without my permission, or I don't want to be the butt of your sexual jokes. And then you just let it go. It'll be what it'll be.
Yeah, and I think it's important as well the way you express it. And again, I'm not saying you don't use the word sorry or, but or sorry or anything like that, but express it very clearly. Try without anger so that they can't retaliate, because that if you're shouting at them or very angry with them, that could spark something in them even more rageful. So try just be really clear and really concise and then get out of there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in my situations, I can't afford to hold a grudge and stop communicating and working with these people. So I actually set the boundary, get out. I may come back 2 hours later and have a totally normal conversation with you, or with the man, I should say, because I need to let them know I'm stable enough to continue onward with the work. And if you do it again, I'll smack you down again.
Right.
But let's get this work done. I'm not going to, if it were at the university, I would actually maybe have to turn it into the Title IX office because there's laws around it. But just in general yoga, which it happens all the time in general yoga, we're not quite that strict. Oh, yes.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Yeah. And I think, it's that person should be ashamed of the situation they're putting you in and embarrassed.
But they're
not.
They're not.
But also just know that that's the level they're at and you'll never win with them. And like you said, you'll state your boundaries, you make it very clear, and then you move on, because it's like arguing with a wall. It's just, there's no point to it.
There's no point.
They're not on a level where you can have a constructive conversation with them.
And I want to say, I think we as women in the spiritual yoga community expect men in this community to be different than the average man. And I don't know about the rest of you, but that's not been my experience. My experience is the men in yoga are just as boundary pushing around these issues as any other man on earth.
Yeah, I have experienced that too. And as well, they can see it as an area where people are vulnerable and more open in this environment, in a yoga, in a spiritual environment. And so that could be an in for some people who want to be a predator.
Right. And, one thing I want to say to all the women out here that are listening is, ladies, it's your responsibility to say it clear, say it loud. If you're not sure if it's okay if they touch you, if you're not sure if it's okay if they're making sexual jokes, well, you're part of the problem. I mean, I hate to be so mean, but you got to know yourself and trust yourself and respect yourself enough to say it. Now, there are other women that are flattered, and that's their prerogative too. Then they don't have to say it, right?
Right, and that's another need being met.
That's another need being met, and that's fine. I have women who really love to be adored. You go for it, girl. If that's your thing, I have no problem with that. It's the people who feel disrespected and don't have the voice to set the boundary that I worry about.
Yes, exactly. Because then that weakness, that perceived weakness then is preyed upon.
Right.
Yeah. So it is very important to, like we said earlier, figure yourself out first, and also the context of the relationship. Know what's appropriate and what's not, whether it's intimate, it's a work environment, it's a platonic, it's in a yoga class. Know what's appropriate and what is not. Oh my goodness. When I started yoga first, talk about a yoga teacher who was male. I laugh now. Inappropriate touching. Oh my goodness. And this was early days. I mean, this was really like early 2000s. Oh my goodness. So inappropriate. But obviously you're vulnerable in certain yoga postures, and he'll come up and give you an adjustment, and you're like, oh my goodness, did he just do that? And the thing is, it's in front of a class of like 30 people.
And, I hope I don't sound like an enabler right now, but on some level, in the olden days, there was not a Me Too movement. There was not, woman power. There was not any place for a woman to go to understand that she could even speak out. Mm-hmm. So on some level, I think back then it was more common and it somehow was more accepted. But now there's no excuse. No. Now we're done.
Yeah, exactly.
Like now we've been trained. We have ethics. We understand it. Like no more. Let's stop doing this. So that's where I have the problem, where now we actually have written ethics in place. And if people are still pushing that boundary, that's what bothers me.
Yeah, when you know better, do better. Is that my Angelo?
Right.
Yeah. And also, yes, I agree. And I think in our generation, I think we were raised differently. Don't call it, well, I can speak for myself. Growing up in Ireland, don't cause a fuss, be nice.
Right.
Like, who do you think you are? All that, you're a woman, know your place kind of thing, which I fought against all the way. But yeah, there was a certain, just be quiet and sit there and just be nice.
Well, I'm from Iowa and we have something called Midwest nice.
Okay.
and Midwest nice means that you don't have any needs. You don't speak your truth. You're quiet. You're pretty. You're smart, and just stay out of everybody's way. But what Midwest nice leads to is autoimmune diseases and fibromyalgia and all sorts of other illnesses. So I've had to learn that my disease in my body, or dis-ease, is directly connected to my inability to set boundaries and speak my truth and say my needs.
100%. I was on a consult just before our call now, and she just went through my courses, but she's now realizing, we had our final consult, and she's like, oh my goodness, me not expressing my truth was leading to a lot of my physical ailments.
100%. And even in the best intentioned relationships. I mean, I have a fabulous relationship with my husband, but in the early years, I put his needs before mine all the time because I loved him and I'd found my soulmate, and why not? And then I started gaining weight and not feeling well. And there came a point where I was like, oh, even though he's worthy of having every need met, it's not good for me.
Yeah.
I need to pull back and at least equally take care of myself.
How often do you see that? And I know for me as well, like I said, my boundaries in my relationships in 20s and 30s, I would lose myself in the relationship. And how many times do we see, particularly women, lose themselves in a relationship, and that it's all about their partner, and they may stop going out with their friends and so on. Like, you're just completely absorbed. And I think that's something that we really need to watch out for, and knowing the boundaries in intimate relationships. And actually, I read something by it was Harriet Lerner. She's a clinical psychologist in New York, and she said an intimate relationship is one in which neither party silences, sacrifices, or betrays the self, and each party expresses strength and vulnerability, weakness, and competence in a balanced way.
Oh, now that's true intimacy,
right?
There's so much trust in that statement, that I trust that if I am completely self-connected and willing to be authentic and willing to state my needs, that you will still love me.
Yeah.
That is intimacy right there. That's sexy.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
But what would it be like, Colette, if you went into a first date, say you got a blind date, and you are completely self-connected and in your truth and in love with yourself, and the first date you're like, hey, here's who I am.
Yeah.
Here's what I believe.
Well, that's it. I think we should fly our freak flag on the first date, and that will be a real indicator whether they're like, oh no, or oh yeah, I like the way you think, I like your vibe. I absolutely do think that's important, because if we put on a mask and think, say what we think the other person wants to hear, then you go into a relationship and months down the road, you're expressing your true feelings, and they're like, wait, now, what just happened here? This is a different person. What's going on? So yeah, I just don't think that does anybody any favors.
I think that's called bait and switch.
Oh yeah, that's true.
don't waste time baiting and switching somebody.
Right. And why do you want to hook someone that's not in alignment with you just for the sake of being with somebody?
That's going to be a boundary disaster for years to come. Cray. Exactly.
Cray. Yeah.
All right. I have another one for you.
Okay.
I love all these scenarios because it really helps us think through like practical applied boundary setting. So you have a client, an Ayurvedic or a yoga therapy client, and they are a disaster. Their life is a disaster. You feel so empathetic towards them. Your heart goes out to them. You almost get lost in their sad, sad story of their sad, sad life. And you can't leave them because they need you. But staying with them is just so hard and no progress is being made. They're stuck in this blue goo. What do you do with boundaries in that situation?
Right. Well, thankfully, what I do in my situation is I have them do a total reset with a cleanse, right? And then empower them to get in touch with their true nature and empower them to understand their true nature. So thankfully, I haven't experienced that because they go through such a reset with me that they come out of the glue, they get unstuck, they let go of that Thomas, that shroud over them. But I do think it's important again to be firm and clear with a person like that. If there is a person who is not doing the work, that's an issue.
Right. Okay. So let's just start there.
Yeah. So
not everybody is ready for yoga and Ayurveda.
Right. So if they're not doing the work, then, and if I see that they're not completing it at all and they're really stuck, well, then I have a chat with them privately and then discuss, what's going on and then see where they need to start. Because like you said, they may not be ready for this. They may need to deal with some emotional stuff first that's holding them back. So maybe they need to speak with a therapist before coming here. And that's usually the case. That I've noticed that, okay, there's a lot of emotions that need to be dealt with first before they even think of doing a cleanse or going into, daily habits or dinacharya. They need to deal with this first.
I agree. And so that's the scope of practice issue. Mm-hmm. And setting the boundary that, number one, this is probably not in my scope of practice. Yeah. You need more help than I can give you in this area. And then number two, let's say that it was in your scope of practice, that you were, I think I can help this person. My second thing is we should never be getting lost in the client.
No.
Never, ever, ever. No. There should not be that merging with whatever it is they're feeling. We should have the personal boundary to be able to say, this is me, this is my life. That is you. That is your life. I'm here as your guide and your helper. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But I'm not going to lay awake thinking about you at night. I'm just not.
No. I do think that, when I'm talking to somebody, I can really feel them.
Yes,
I'm like a compassionate. I am an empath. I can feel them. Like, if they're getting upset, I can feel it in my heart. But then after the call, you have to protect your energy field and let go. There is a practice in doing that, right? That after each session, you whether it's a mantra you say or something you visualize, that you let go of that energy from that call, and then when you reconnect with them again, yes, you are as empathetic and compassionate and want to help them, but it's not serving you or the client to carry that energy into the rest of your day. And how would it affect the rest of your relationships in your life? My goodness.
And I would argue that if you're unable to set that boundary and it is seeping into the rest of your day and your night and you're thinking about that person and upset by it, I would argue there's some countertransference going on where there's some issues inside of you that are unresolved, that are kind of hooking into that person's issues. Right. And you need to go get help from your therapist or your mentor. Like, if there's countertransference happening, that's a signal to go get help for yourself.
Absolutely.
Even practitioners need help and support and mentors.
Yes. Yes. And again, it's really understanding your emotions, right? And your needs, and understanding what it is you're feeling after a call, and knowing when to step away. And of course, the egos that play there as well. You can't help everybody, and maybe sometimes not every client is the right fit.
Well, and that's what I love about Ayurveda and yoga therapy, is that the client is healing themselves. Mm-hmm. They are self-empowered, and they are doing the work. We are not healing them. We're not doing, putting our Reiki or a prana into them. Exactly. It's not that. It's they are finding more self-awareness. They are finding new ways of perceiving, new ways of communicating, new ways of being in the world. Mm-hmm. And we're just there to support that process. So I love that, because that helps me have a better boundary with my clients and not feel so, immersed with them or,
Absolutely. It's all about empowering them. We're going to guide them. We're going to we can see from our viewpoint of where they need to work on and what's happening and where the imbalances are, etc. We can give them a strategy. We'll be there to support them, hold their hand. But it's all about empowering them to go forward and then, live your life. And you don't need me as a crutch or a support.
And that goes back to codependency. Right. I mean, if I'm being codependent with my client and I think they need me to do their own healing, okay, we've already got problems.
Yeah. No, that's a lot of issues. Codependency, ego, a lot going on there. Yeah, absolutely. So I'd like to talk a little bit about signs of unhealthy boundaries, right? So people can kind of decipher, well, what does it look like? One of the big ones would be like betraying yourself and your values, and in order to please others and make them happy.
Yep.
Right. Also, we talked about this, a poor sense of who you are and allowing others to define you. So again, that goes back to do your self-study through Ayurveda, through yoga. Do that. You have to start there. You have to understand yourself before you can even go forward and set healthy boundaries.
I call that the person who's a chameleon. They just kind of merge into whoever's in front of them at the moment.
So true. Yeah. And then not speaking up for yourself, right? Really communicating poorly. It's your responsibility.
And we have discussed, do it fast, do it clearly, and do it without a lot of emotion, and get out. Yes.
And do it. Yeah. Be concise and never apologize and never go into this long explanation. You do not have to analyze it. Allowing others to make decisions for you. So that's important. I mean, I know there's some people, like the tendency, say, of Kapha constitution is to kind of go with the flow and to be easygoing. But also, if you have a tendency to be that way, is making sure that you're okay with the decision that's been made. Check in with yourself,
Take responsibility for our life.
Yes.
I mean,
there you go.
If you think you're a victim all the time, that's a sign you're not having good boundaries.
That's something to definitely look at. Absolutely. Absolutely. And then allowing others to affect your mood or your self-esteem. So if you're in a relationship and your partner wakes up in a bad mood and you're taking on all that energy, and now all of a sudden, your day is crappy because of that, that's poor boundaries as well.
You're reminding me, this morning I was on my treadmill getting a run, supposed to be de-stressing, and my husband comes in to tell me about the latest in American politics. Oh. And after like 5 minutes, I was like, okay, we're done. Get out. Mm-hmm. No, this is my time. Mm-hmm. I do not want to hear about politics this morning. Good. And he was very cool about it. He was like, oh yeah, okay, see ya. But I had to set that boundary.
Yeah, and that's it. That's it. And if somebody, if a partner's in a funk, go, okay, I'm going to give you some time with your funky attitude, and I'm going to, go do something else because I don't want that funk on me.
I think that's a great place to end. I don't want that funk on me. It's hilarious.
So there you go. I do think, it takes time, to get the confidence, right? And it takes practice. for this good communication and to be firm, but boundaries allow you really to get more out of what you want out of life and to keep away what you don't want. So practice it. Keep practicing this good communication, be clear, and you'll see more positive results and you'll gain confidence, and it really will become easier with practice.
I cannot reiterate that enough, that it has been a muscle I've been building for 15 years. And I was terrible at the beginning, and I'm still not good when I'm tired or hungry, or then I go back to my old ways. But it's a muscle that we build. And one last thing I would say is find a woman that represents the type of woman you want to be. Like for me, Ruth Bader Ginsburg or somebody that you just really think has it together, and use that as your avatar.
Yeah.
That's where I want to end up one day.
Yeah. That's a beautiful idea. I love it. And I'm going to attach that nonviolent communication website. It's nvc.org. Right, Amy? You believe it? But I'll attach it in the show notes because I think that's amazing with the whole identifying your feelings and then knowing the needs under the feelings. I mean, that is such amazing resources. So yeah, I'll put that link in the show notes as well. Amy, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure.
Yes. And I look forward to our next conversation. I look forward to them all.
Great. Have a wonderful evening.
You too, my dear. Take good care of yourself.
Thanks. Bye.